Life is always unfolding for us, a life that is dynamically alive, a life that is specifically attuned to each one of us. It's not random. When that unfoldment aligns with some vision that we have of ourselves, then often we see it in a positive way, like a new relationship or a promotion at work or a new job, or maybe for some, when we were younger, finding out that there's going to be a new baby in our lives. All sorts of things that felt good to us and felt like things that we could often step into. Sometimes when the unfolding is not in alignment with the vision that we had for our lives, it can bring up a lot of resistance and a sense of deficiency in us. Things like losing a job, losing a house in a natural disaster, the death of a loved one. We can feel unprepared. And in those places, as I said, it can feel like the universe is out to get us, especially when our inner judge gets on us. And I'm hoping you all are aware of your inner judge. Your judge can then be saying, you can't do this, or this isn't fair. And what happens is we tend then to pull back from our life. We don't claim the potential of this unfolding. Mm-hmm. Life is always inviting us into greater and greater expression of our potential, whether we see it or not. When there is that pullback, in my career as a minister, which I've been a minister for over 30 years, I always blame that on the ego. The ego is, a series of patterned ways of being that are always trying to pull us back to what's known, what it can control in our life. So it wants us to live a smaller life, a life that's more controlled, not in the flow of spirit. But I have learned recently that there's more at play than just the activity of our ego, and that is the development of our soul. And the soul plays, a big part in our lives because it is the housing of spirit. And each one of our souls is unique. Each of it has a unique fabric. So even though we may have the same skills or the same interests as the person sitting next to us, it will be expressed slightly different through us. We bring a perspective to it. So in unity, my concern is that we focus a little too narrowly. Our focus often is, one, you getting to know what limits you, which is the ego, because spirit never limits you. And so what we do when we're looking at the ego, we want to bring understanding to why we think the way we do. When someone first comes into the spiritual path, they often will tell you, here's who I am, this is what I do well, this is what I don't do well. That's ego. Because in spirit, we are endless potential. But for ego, we need to be known. We need to know exactly who we are, exactly what we can do. We need to know what's safe. So we get to know that. And with understanding, that often comes a softening of those beliefs so that we can be more open to the flow of spirit in us, to this unfolding. And then we teach you about spirit. For example, in Unity, we talk about the 12 powers, which we know Diana loves. And we also then work on things like prosperity to help you understand that you can trust the activity of spirit, that the activity of spirit is always abundant. And as we can trust, then more we can relax into this flow that is spirit. But the thing that we don't talk about is the development of the soul. In one of the songs it said the soul is complete. No, it's not. If it was complete, Every child would be born able to speak, walk, talk, communicate, be the president of a major corporation. No, the soul is not complete. The soul has endless potential, but all through our life, the soul needs to develop and grow, always. And it's interesting that our early childhood and our early childhood development sets the pace or sets the tone for the development of our soul. If you grew up in a family where you could be curious, where you were welcome to explore things, where you were not shut down for being this way or that way or thinking this way or that way, then you have a natural propensity, a natural orientation towards growing, towards leaning into new things, trying new things, always developing. That was not my childhood. Probably was not yours either. Because we all have human parents, right? So there are several things that can happen with our soul. One, we can have arrested development. And actually, that is the ego. What's interesting, the ego doesn't start forming till about age 1.5 or 2. And for women, it stops forming at around age 18. Men, takes longer. Usually about age 21. So we have time. We have time to let there be development in the soul before the ego caps it off. A great example of that, oh, and let me just also say one other thing. When there is arrested development, there's enough development so that when we realize what's going on, it's pretty easy for it to continue. The reason for that is that, and this is where brain sciences help us spiritually, the brain develops neural pathways, right? That's what allows us to do so many things in our lives. And when arrested development happens, we just stop using that pathway or we stop its development. So a great example of this, I was one of those kids that had, and I don't exactly know how to describe this gift, and I will assure you that my parents did not see it as a gift, but I could see things clearly. Maybe that's a way to, I had the gift of clarity. And I would often ask questions that my parents didn't want to talk about. And I grew up in that era where dinner was the whole family together. And I'm one of 5 kids, so the 7 of us would be sitting together, and I would ask questions. And the number one response I got, and this was always from my mother, my father was pretty silent about it, "Oh God, let's not talk about that." So I had to call my mother, because this event is never going to be forgotten by my family. I had to call my mother to see about how old I was. She thought I was either 8 or 9 when this happened. But one of my dad's good friends came to live with us. No reason was given, but after being in the house with him for a week, what I found out was that his wife had thrown him out. So at dinner one night, I turned to him and I said, "So Doug, why do you suppose your wife threw you out?" I thought my dad was going to leap across the table and kill me. I mean, you know how you suddenly go, because when I would ask these questions, often they were joked about. It could be kind of funny or whatever. This was not funny. And my mother, in this very high-pitched voice, goes, "Oh God, let's not talk about that." And what happened was suddenly I realized I could not trust this flow of inspiration, this flow of ideas, this flow of clarity. And I very specifically remember deciding I have got to pause. I've got to put, I didn't even know the words then, I've got to put spirit on hold here. I need to build a gap into my thinking, and I need to decide, is this okay to ask or to say? That's how our ego forms. And that becomes arrested development in us. So then I become a minister years later, And you can imagine with that need to have a gap, I wrote out every talk and I tried to memorize them. Have you ever tried to memorize 20 minutes of material, which, as a minister never is 20 minutes. It'll be, I hope you guys have at least an hour this morning. So it became clear to me, and this is the way the unfolding works. One day it became clear to me, I have got to give up on writing these talks out and memorizing them. One, it's driving me nuts, and two, it's not very inspiring to the congregation. And so I started getting up and just giving talks, which is great. You see, I was able to do that because the neural pathways are already there. However, there wasn't much development. And I would say things that you shouldn't say from the pulpit. Diana was probably in a few of those talks. And luckily, we usually in Unity have very supportive boards. And some board member would pull me aside after church and say, you can't really say that, or you can't phrase it that way, or whatever. And I was open to hearing it. You don't. What often happens is we feel embarrassed about it. And again, our judge gets on us, we want to pull back. But for me, I thought, okay, I'm learning. Now, I thought it was the need for my inner child to develop, right? I didn't understand. It's just soul development. And it happened fast. The board only had to pull me aside 4 times. But I started to get the hang of it, that it was working. Well, maybe I only remember them. Maybe there were more incidences, but the board pulled me aside 4 times. So that's arrested development. Where it becomes much more challenging is if there's an area in our life where we have little or no development. Development of our soul happens through the modeling of our parents. First thing, there are some things that our soul has an orientation towards, a proclivity. We could say it's hardwired. That's to walk, talk, to relate. These are all things that human beings have to do. And but they need to be evoked in us. And so when we see our parents walking, we want to walk. When we hear them talking, we want to talk. And you see, neural pathways need a lot of repetition, right? So you can see it if you've had a baby, or for me, I'm the oldest of 5. I've gotten to see a lot of kids come along. They needed lots of repetition to walk, talk, and particularly in developing these different expressions of who we are. If we have not been exposed to something, then it's going to take a lot of repetition. And the number one way you will know that you are not exposed to something is when it comes up in your life, you will feel like you are non-functional, like you can't do it. You feel it's more than even just a mental thing. It's like your whole system says, I don't know what I'm doing here. So I got to see, again, not knowing what was going on, I got to see this when I was in Unity Ministerial School. And what the seminary is another way of putting it, the Unity Seminary. I invited one of my classmates over for dinner. We were off to some event afterwards, and I said, come over for dinner. We'll get to know each other a little bit better. We finished, and by the way, the conversation at dinner was easy, flowing, laughing. We could dip into some really serious stuff and then out to fun stuff. It just had a flow to it until we finished dinner early enough that we could clean up the kitchen. And I wanted to clean up the kitchen because my apartment didn't have a dishwasher, and I was learning quickly, if you don't clean up pretty quick, you got a lot more work on your hands trying to get these, dried foods off your plates and stuff. So I said, hey, how about if we do the dishes before we go? Totally changed in her countenance. Like it was like she left the room. Totally withdrew. And, being in ministerial school, they would say, hey, what's going on? And after a long pause, she said, I have never done dishes. I thought she was joking. She was at least 8 years older than me. I was 30, maybe even older than that. So she was in her late 30s or early 40s. How the hell do you get that long without doing dishes, right? But it turns out that she was a member of a very wealthy family. Not only had she never done dishes, she had never done laundry. She had never made her bed.
Wow.
The only reason she had never cooked anything. The only reason she knew how to drive was the family chauffeur was given priority to mom and dad. And if you wanted to go somewhere starting at age 16, you better learn to drive. She lived, I didn't know these things. She lived in a hotel while she was at seminary and ate every meal out, flew home every weekend where they did all her laundry and got her ready.
Oh my gosh.
You have to give her credit because she said, after another pause, I guess there's no time better than right now to learn how to do dishes. But this is very telling, what I'm going to tell you next. She got up. I said, why don't you wash? I will dry and put things away since it's my kitchen. She stood at the sink and was paralyzed.
Oh.
You know, she said, I have no idea what to do here. Another courageous step, right? I had to turn the water on. I said, you wait till the water gets to a temperature, a nice hot but tolerable. Then we put this stopper in the sink. I had a double sink, you know. And okay, here you put this much soap in and use your hand, kind of stir it around. I had to show her how to wash. And, you know, I could talk to you. I could be washing dishes right now. No problem, right? She had to totally concentrate. She learned the hard way that soap makes dishes slippery. Dropped a few things, luckily didn't break them. Let's see, was there anything else that she learned? The thing that was amazing to me was it was so mechanical. I even had to show her the movement to wash a dish, right? I mean, she didn't feel like she knew anything. And you can understand, right? We don't want to step into that. Who wants to? Who wants to step into that level of not knowing, of feeling so vulnerable, of feeling so exposed? And so what do we tend to do? When we haven't exposed to something that the universe is unfolding for us, that will remember, there's no accident in the universe's unfolding of your life. There is some potential that is waiting to be claimed by you. And by the way, you don't need to learn to do everything, but sometimes you'll know that Spirit is calling you. And if you run into an area of arrested or no development and you pull back, you have not only limited yourself, but you have limited the world. Because you are the light of the world. You are bringing it forward. And it's interesting that development can be in the simplest things. I've been sharing with Susan and Scott that this last year, for the last 11 months, I've been really focused on losing weight. And what I've gotten to see is that I'm really good at convincing myself I can lose weight in the morning. But when it comes to 8 o'clock at night, I want to eat the door off my refrigerator. I'm like crazy hungry, even if I've had a great meal, right? So I'm always one that thinks it's important to be curious about these patterns that we have. And so I've gotten to see some interesting things. One, my parents are two people that have never, ever had to think about their weight, which and my dad, literally, I bet 5 nights a week at least, maybe more, at about 8 o'clock at night, would either pop the biggest bowl of popcorn you've ever seen, and sometimes would go and pop another one because there were 7 of us, right? Or he would go scoop out ice cream for everybody. And if you were studying in your room, you know, they would yell, hey, there's popcorn. Of course, you could smell the popcorn, right? Or there's ice cream. And we would come down. And it was more than just having the popcorn or the ice cream. We came together. You weren't, you know, there was no loneliness. It meant community. My family was a lot of fun. You know, it was just a time. And so here I am. I'm single again. I'm, you know, Weight loss requires eating less, but watching what you eat. And wow, do I get triggered around 8 o'clock? So that's some of that is the ego's patterning, right? But the piece that I'm getting to see is because my parents never had to use restriction around food, I have not developed will around food. My way of losing weight is it's just simply not in the house, right? If I go to someone else's house for dinner, baby, gluttonous, here we go. Because there was always plenty of food in the house that I grew up, and we were never told not to eat. This is an area of little or no soul development for me. I've been working on it now for 11 months, and I don't feel like I've made a huge amount of progress, except I've been able to lose more than 20 pounds. So I've made some progress. But here's what I've read about soul development. Because it's slow, you want to find the things that are working and you want to praise yourself for them. Okay? So I stopped looking at when I had lost a pound. I started doing quarter pounds. To have some encouragement of myself. I also did a lot of reading and research about balancing protein out through my day. And instead of having sugary snacks, I have little protein things that I can have at 8 o'clock at night. And it's not as satisfying, but it takes the edge off, right? And you just want to generally be patient with yourself because it's so easy. Like even I caught myself in the beginning going, I don't get it. I'm something wrong with me. I'm trying to lose weight here and it's not happening. And that's us getting caught into the inner judgment, the inner judge, and it's not helping. It's like every kid needs to be mirrored and mirrored in a positive way. Our soul needs to be supported in a positive way. Life is amazing. Really, if we could take a step back from our lives and not put the judgment on it, we could see that the universe is always unfolding a life that is intended to be dynamically alive for you, attuned to you, and drawing out your potential, your contribution, not only to yourself, but to the world around you. We focus a lot on spirit and we can fall into the belief that, wow, if I just get out of the way of spirit, my life's going to be perfect. Spirit will handle everything. Yes, spirit is complete. There is no flaw in spirit, and spirit is unchanging. The same spirit in me is the same spirit that's in all of you. But our souls need to develop and grow. And so as we open to that fact in a generous, open, non-judgmental way, and compliment ourselves on our accomplishments, we can support that soul in really embracing the totality of what spirit is in us. And in that life, when we lay down to die, go, yes, I've had a good life. Thank you.